In Chile, a protest called by Mapuche leaders held on Thursday demanding justice for the death of a Mapuche man at the hands of the national police turned violent. Our correspondent Diario Valenzuela tells us more.
A 48-hour demonstration called by the Mapuche people will end today. It was a call to demonstrate following a traditional assembly held by leaders where a way forward was given for the determination of these ancestral people. They demand three things from the government of Chile. First, demilitarization of Araucanía region. Secondly, reinstitution for their ancestral lands. And thirdly, a special commission to be created before the Congress and citizens to demonstrate the historical dispossession these people have suffered. These demonstrations have taken place all over the country, especially in the south. Yesterday, a letter was presented to Sebastián Piñera demanding that he assume his political responsibility in the murder of Mapuche leader Camilo Catrillanca. But until today, we've heard official silence inside the government house. We will continue to report about any new demonstrations. The focus today will be on any government response following this day of protest.
We thank Diare for that report. Ecuadorian Minister of Labor Raúl Ledesma has announced that beginning in 2019, there will be an $8 increase to the minimum national wage. This was rejected by many workers' organizations. Denise Herrera with the details.
Ecuador's government announced that the minimum wage will increase from 386 to 394. This was ordered by the presidency after no agreement was reached by the workers and employers in the National Council of Labor and Salaries. Minister Ledesma stated that the decision was based on technical criteria with the goal of improving the basic living expenses and to support the productive development of business.
It is important to remember, last year the minimum wage increased by $11 based on the same criteria. It was recognized by workers that last year's minimum wage could almost cover the basic necessities. This means that if last year there wasn't an increase of $11 to the minimum wage, we couldn't have covered citizens' basic necessities.
This measure was rejected by many worker sectors who consider this small raise to minimum wage to be offensive.
General de sueldos y salarios. There is no general increase of salaries. These $8 only benefit 350,000 private workers. This doesn't even add up to 20%. Employers don't care about workers' dignity. They don't care about the lives of others. They only care about increasing their capital and paycheck. This $8 increase is an attack.
The Ecuadorian Confederation of Workers Unions echoed these complaints, stating that this measure will bring mass layoffs. Layoffs which already began during the less than 2 years of the current government. They also estimate that there have already been around 20,000 dismissals in their union.
This is a measure that will force employers to lay off workers and hire workers for part-time jobs and with no legal contracts. This salary increase will not only affect workers' purchasing power, but will also increase unemployment.
Added to this, the government has recently announced that the price of gas will be increased in Ecuador. The government stated that the price of Extra and Eco País gas will be passed from 1.48 to 1.85. They also announced that the prices of private super and diesel gasoline will be determined by the market. Denise Herrera, Telesur, Ecuador.
Venezuela has issued a statement categorically rejecting the decision of the OES Secretary General in seeking to initiate the application of the Inter-American Democratic Charter on Nicaragua. Such a measure would potentially pave the way for legal sanctions against the Nicaraguan government. The communique reads that OES head Luis Almagro has once again demonstrated his subservience to U.S. interests and continues to use the Organization of American States as an instrument against popular movements. Also, Evo Morales condemned the OES decision. On his personal account, he tweeted, "We reject that on instruction of the empire and with coup intentions, the intent to apply the Democratic Charter to Nicaragua. You cannot go against the self-determination of peoples. The organisms must respect the sovereignty of Nicaragua." This, of course, follows a statement earlier in the week by ALBA TCP countries, which rejected the application of unilateral U.S. sanctions against Nicaragua. The autopsy of Rafael Merchan, a key witness in the Odebrecht corruption case in Colombia, is expected in the coming hours. José Manuel Jiménez has the latest.
Rafael Merchan was one of the key witnesses in the Odebrecht corruption case in various building sites, like the Ruta del Sol 2. He was also called a witness by the defense team of Luis Fernando Andrade, former director of the National Agency of Infrastructure. Andrade is being accused of corruption. Merchan's testimony was going to be key for the investigation, but unfortunately he was found dead yesterday in an apartment in the north of Bogotá. With Merchan, there have now been 2 people involved in this case who have lost their lives. Let's recall the case of Jorge Enrique Pizano, who was found dead on November 8th. The autopsy for Rafael Merchan has yet to be released.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. 2 women have died in Jamaica after a boat carrying over a dozen passengers capsized. The victims have not yet been identified. 11 passengers were rescued off the coast of Kingston and have been transferred to a local hospital. Authorities say they responded immediately to the distress call made by the boat and were able to recover the rest of the passengers. The accident happened between Port Royal and Lim Cay. The government of Jamaica is considering imposing fines of up to $7,800 for violating the country's plastic ban. The ban on single-use plastics will take effect on January the 1st. It's part of a state strategy to reduce the impact plastic waste is having on the environment. The Ministry of Economic Growth is still debating ways to enforce the ban. Dominica's government is set to start construction on a geothermal energy plant in 2019. The plant will help bring clean and low-cost renewable energy to around 23,000 homes, according to the government. The project is expected to be completed in 18 months. So far, the government has invested $18 million in the plant to be built in the Rusu Valley. It will be a major boost to the Caribbean island, which aims to be the world's first climate-resilient country. Next year will mark 60 years since the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. During the fight against the government of Fulgencio Batista, Venezuela was one of the countries that helped the revolutionaries the most. As such, once Fidel Castro came to power, his first official state visit was to Venezuela, where he received a hero's welcome. Let's look back at this historic visit.
Pedro García Peláez was one of the mythical revolutionary fighters of La Sierra Maestra that accompanied Fidel Castro during his first official visit abroad to Venezuela. 60 years later, the images from his trip remain intact in the memory of the retired general.
For countries that have been oppressed for so long, seeing a liberator like Fidel meant everything. The whole thing was spontaneous, nothing was organized. Everyone went with him. The highways in Venezuela were full of people, just like here in Cuba.
They say that at 3 in the morning, people started to arrive to what then was called Maiquetía Airport in Caracas. The Cuban delegation was invited to participate in the celebrations for the first anniversary of the defeat of dictator Marcos Pérez Jiménez. Those who were there say that it took them 45 minutes to move through the human masses gathered to welcome them.
Fidel Castro has come to Venezuela as a representative of a country that knew how to fight for its liberation. And he comes with the help of a country that cheers for him.
The journalists that covered that day's event say that he was not called by his last name. In Venezuela and in Cuba, he is simply called Fidel.
I come in the name of the people that today ask for your help and your solidarity. I come to say to the Venezuelan people that they can count with our help and our unconditional solidarity.
At the O'Leary in Caracas, 300,000 people took part in welcoming Fidel. During 2 hours, he explained the ideals behind the Cuban Revolution.
If someday Venezuela were to be under the boot of a tyrant, count on us, the Cuban combatants of La Sierra Maestra.
Each one of his speeches represented a new thesis, a new original idea. He spoke about the remaining dictatorships in the American continent and the need to create a news agency that worked in the service of democracy. He took the presidential podium at the Chamber of Deputies in Caracas. Government officials received him in Miraflores Palace. He was granted an honorary degree, and he spoke with President Rómulo Betancourt and with Chilean poet Pablo Neruda.
Fidel Castro has come to a diplomatic act in his honor, making his way down from his private room at the Cuban embassy with the utmost humility. Despite every formality given to him, he is still the same person who spoke directly with the campesinos from La Sierra Maestra for over 2 years during his revolutionary campaign.
Fidel kept inside his heart the impact of the crowds that came to greet him in Venezuela. He said Venezuela must become a leading nation to unify all of America. Cuba's voice had started to travel across the world.
In just a few days to go before his term in office comes to an end, Brazilian President Michel Temer has a disapproval rating of over 80%. According to a poll by Datafolha, 82% of Brazilians say they are against Temer. Meanwhile, 62% categorize his government as really bad. Michel Temer came to power after a parliamentary coup against former President Dilma Rousseff in 2016. Meanwhile, the Workers' Party legislative bloc has announced they won't attend President-Elect Bolsonaro's swearing-in ceremony in Congress. The PT said Bolsonaro promotes hate against social movements, against their party, and against former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. They added that Bolsonaro will lead an authoritarian, unpopular, and unpatriotic government with racist and misogynist views. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has met with Brazil's President-elect Jair Bolsonaro ahead of his inauguration. This is the first visit to Brazil by an Israeli premier. No announcement to Jerusalem was made, as some anticipated, regarding the moving of the Brazilian embassy in Israel. Other guests will include Chilean President Sebastián Piñera, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Our correspondent in Brazil, André Vieira, gives us the details.
The meeting between Brazilian President-elect Jair Bolsonaro and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, culminated this afternoon. Following this meeting, the two held a press conference where they expressed their commitment to strengthen ties between the two countries and a commitment to work together across different sectors. Israel's Prime Minister also invited the Brazilian President-elect to visit his country. Bolsonaro replied that he'll plan a trip with his committee to travel before March. The two heads of state did not speak about change in the location of the Brazilian embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Nothing was said on this controversial issue. Bolsonaro promised to do so during his campaign, but the move seems to be difficult among all the rejection coming from the Arab world. Bolsonaro is also feeling the pressure of the business sector of Brazil, mainly from the meat exporters, who asked him not to change the location of the embassy, because that could affect trade with the Arab region, which are major purchasers of the Brazilian meat. Netanyahu will remain in Brazil until January 1st, when Bolsonaro will be sworn in as new president.
We thank Andre for that report. The government of Bolivia is expecting the annual report from the United Nations on the eradication of illicit drug crops and alternative development. There are great expectations over the report's finding, as last year's showed an increase of 7% in the production of illegal crops.
Social organizations and local authorities from coca leaf producing zones have highlighted that the work of reducing illegal crops has been done for years, in agreement with campesino unions.
There is a coordinated teamwork with social organizations, as well as with different public and private organizations. We have seen a very positive result for our country.
Last year, coca leaf farming increased by 7%, which set off alarms within the organizations responsible for the reduction of these crops. This year, they achieved the record of reducing over 11,000 hectares of coca leaf crops, almost double the 6,200 removed last year.
This year, what we want to see in the report is that we have destroyed most of the illegal crop. That's the best we can achieve at the moment, because if we do a comparison across the region, taking into account all the financial support that comes from Colombia for the growth of coca leaf, they have almost quadrupled their crops. The same is happening in Peru.
Since 2009, when the United States Agricultural Agency was expelled for meddling with Bolivia's international policies, the government assumed the costs of eradicating illegal crops. They also promoted cooperation with neighboring countries and introduced methods approved by campesino unions.
We have new tools that allow the national police to be more efficient. For example, paying informants or intercepting calls. We have an effective cooperation law and a law to destroy property taken from drug traffickers.
Bolivia is the third largest producer of coca, having about 24,500 hectares of the crop last year, out of which 20,000 were legal. Peru comes in second place with 44,000 hectares, and Colombia first with more than 200,000 hectares.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro attended a presidential New Year's salute alongside the Bolivarian Armed Forces. Accompanied by the Minister of Defense and the country's Attorney General, the president paid tribute to South American liberator Simón Bolívar, as well as the commander and leader of the Bolivarian Revolution, Hugo Chávez. During the activity, Maduro highlighted the work of Venezuela's armed forces and sent a message of solidarity for the work being carried out in the defense of the country's national sovereignty. The town of Caucagua in Venezuela's state of Miranda celebrates the Feast of the Holy Innocents, a 205-year-old cultural tradition held every 27th and 28th of December. Here, the Pantoja community carry green and red flags, symbolizing the richness of the land and the blood of lost children. It's a tradition which is passed down from generation to generation. The boleros are central to the activities as they go around the village, frightening people in colorful costumes and hats. The demonstration has its origins on the cacao haciendas that were installed during colonial times. The characters depict enslaved people who first began these traditional dances. According to history, the plantation owners allowed their enslaved people to have December 28th as a free day, so they would plan parties and go out to dance in colorful clothing. The women would wear large hats adorned with fruits, flowers, and twigs, in celebration, and they made fun of their masters while enjoying food and beverages. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome. With less than 48 hours to go before the presidential elections, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a new poll is pointing to a victory for the opposition. Several protests are taking place in Beni and Butembo, where elections have been postponed. The poll by New York-based Congo Research Group revealed that 44% of voters intend to vote for the Lamuka coalition candidate Martin Fayulu. This puts him ahead of former frontrunner Félix Tshisekedi and the ruling party's Emmanuel Shadari. Our correspondent in the Democratic Republic of Congo has the details.
With 48 hours until the election, there are little signs of preparation for polls or the necessary documents and ballot boxes for vote. Citizens of Kinshasa are tired of lies, and while they maintain that they have the right to vote, they are not sure if they will be able to do so. In Kinshasa, polling centers could be prepared 24 hours early. But farmers from Bandundung and other villages with limited access and where campesinos reside are also worried that they may not be able to vote and may be excluded, as the farmers from Beni and Butembo and Jumbi. In Kinshasa, people don't know where they will vote. They're supposed to know it on the same day. They will have to figure out where to vote and pay for transport and line up because the Electoral Commission has decided to reorganize the number of people which will vote in each center. These elections are expected to be disorganized, and possibly on purpose, to increase the rate of abstention and undermine electors' faith in the possibility of a victory in results, as happened in 2011. In any case, Kinshasa citizens and its intelligence have the answer.
Thousands of opposition supporters have taken to the streets of Dakar, calling on the Senegalese government to ensure free and fair presidential election. Protesters demanded that the Interior Minister, who is in charge of organizing the elections, leave his position as he is seen favoring the ruling party. There is also a possibility that 2 opposition candidates will get their candidacy rejected by the Constitutional Court ahead of the elections in late February 2019. Thousands of people have fled their homes in the eastern Nigeria after Boko Haram fighters overran 2 military bases in the area. The Islamic State-affiliated militants reportedly overpowered the multinational force manning the military bases after hours of fierce fighting. In 2015, the militants overran the same bases and killed hundreds of civilians before the government sent reinforcements to the town. 3 Vietnamese tourists have been killed and another 9 have been injured from a bomb explosion near their bus as they were traveling to the Giza pyramids in Egypt. The bus was carrying 14 tourists from Vietnam when a homemade device exploded on a roadside near the Giza pyramids in Cairo. The bus driver and the tour guide, both Egyptian, were also wounded. Security forces have cordoned off the area and opened an investigation into the case. No group has claimed responsibility yet. Israeli authorities have demolished over 500 Palestinian homes in 2018, leaving more than 1,000 people homeless. The report issued by the Abdullah Urani Center shows that a majority of demolitions were carried out in the Israeli-occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. In addition to homes demolished to pave way for Jewish-only settlements, Israeli authorities frequently demolish the homes of Palestinians allegedly involved in attacks against them. A new report has accused the UK government of social murder of vulnerable people through austerity measures. The research published by the British Lancaster University in a peer-reviewed journal shows that the current government's policies regarding the social security system are harming working-class people. Severe cuts to benefits could harm the physical and mental well-being of low-income people. This resulted in an increase in suicides, deaths to malnutrition, and homeless people dying on the streets. Donald Trump has threatened to close the border and stop any financial aid for Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador if he does not get support from the Democratic Party to build a wall. Alina Duarte has the details.
This Friday, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to close the southern border if the Democrats refused to provide funding to complete the construction of the wall. He took to Twitter threatening to close the border after 1 week of the partial shutdown of the government, which has affected close to 800,000 public workers. Via his Twitter account, he said he is forced to close the southern border if the Democrats don't give up the money to finish the wall and change the migration laws that he labeled as ridiculous. He also assured that the United States is losing money with Mexico, more than $75,000 every year, not counting drug money. He's insisted on closing the border and building the wall. He said that Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador are not doing anything for the U.S., only taking its money. Trump also threatened to cut all financial aid to these countries that he says are taking advantage of the United States, saying that they have been doing so for years. These are the latest threats from U.S. President Donald Trump in his efforts to obtain the $5 million for the wall.
We thank Alina for that report. And we end in Jamaica, where Prime Minister Andrew Holmes has shown that it really is a season to be jolly with his dance moves. As we prepare to say goodbye to this year and celebrate the start of 2019, Holmes has reminded us how we should do it. So don't forget to show off your best moves as you dance the night away. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.